So I was just about to do a workout and I saw this post from Joey Swoll. And look, this isn't to call out Joey Swoll or anything he does. I think a lot of the stuff he does is great, actually. And I really appreciate the sense of accountability he sends to the gym world. And I also appreciate the sentiment within this post, right? The idea is that for blokes out there, just be yourself, be good, be kind, and you know what, things will be okay. And I like that message, I really do. My issue is actually really with the things that are written above the final statement. Some of them are just too generalized, and I don't think they're coming from the same place as the final statement, right? So the main one, if a man has standards, he's a misogynist, is probably the main one I'm going to talk to, because that kind of underpins all the rest of this stuff. And hopefully I'll be able to paint that picture as I work through this. It's, I do a lot of work with men and with boys around the country, around Australia. I travel around the country and I speak a lot about misogyny, right? And when I talk about misogyny, I give the definition that it is the hatred of women, right? And there's usually some bloke who's like, what do you mean it's the hatred of women? I've been called a misogynist. Are people telling me that I hate women because I don't hate women? And I can understand why, some men and boys would be frustrated by that. I can also recognize that there are certainly men out there who do hate women. That is a real thing that does exist. Please read the book Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. But what I want to talk about here is I'm not going to negate the fact that exists, but I do want to talk about some of those blokes who might be confused about what misogyny is, why it's there. Because for most men, right, the experience of misogyny doesn't start with just waking up and going, I hate women, right? And for most men, it's not a recognition that they actually might be participating in a culture that supports the hatred of women. For most of them, the experience they have of misogyny is the bullying and the belittling and the shaming they experience by other men for not being man enough. For most men, that's actually where misogyny starts, right? And look, let's be real. There are standards that are misogynistic, especially when those standards are based on these kind of made up ideas about what a man should be based on masculinity and what a woman should be based on femininity, right? So these expectations that are placed on men to be tough and be strong and protect and provide and make lots of money and be the leader in the workforce and drive big and fast cars and build muscle and always be on top of everything and be nonchalant and never show your emotions unless, of course, you're angry. These are all expectations placed on men under this sort of guise of masculinity. And simultaneously, we have expectations placed on women under femininity, like be pretty, be skinny, be petite, be curvy, wear makeup, wear dresses, be submissive, be quiet, work in assistant type roles or care roles, be caring and nurturing, be a mother. These are all kind of expectations placed on women and girls. And so when our standards are based on these particular expectations, they can be misogynistic, especially when we try and enforce those standards on other people. And I think that's kind of what some of this is doing, right? Some of the statements that are made, there's two statements in here. If a man expresses sadness, he's weak. And if a man expresses emotions, he's a simp. So these are actually misogynistic statements. Because some of the characteristics that we put under the idea of femininity are things like being emotional and being sad, right? So when we see men being sad or being emotional, then we call him weak and a simp. That's actually us participating in a culture of misogyny that says being any of these kinds of feminine characteristics means that you're not man enough. What it also means is that being feminine is wrong. Being feminine is lesser. And we also try to convince ourselves that women should be feminine. So what does it say about them? See, we're set up through these rigid ideas about men and women and masculinity and femininity, and just based on the gender we were assigned at birth, we are set up to undervalue or to devalue women. And then we reinforce that through bullying and belittling and shaming each other for participating in any of these other characteristics that sit over there in the idea of femininity. And look, it is okay to be angry. It is okay to be sad and to be afraid and to be lonely and anxious and have all of these emotions. We're human beings. We are supposed to be able to engage with these emotions, but we need to remember that it is more commonly the bullying and belittling and shaming of our mates and other men that force us to move away from it. And while we walk away from these particular characteristics, we're also buying into the idea that a human would be worth less if they engaged in them. And we convince ourselves that these characteristics are for women. So it's so easy for men to walk this path from being bullied and belittled and shamed for being anything that might be deemed as feminine towards the kind of hatred of women or the blame of women. We're not actively sitting there saying, I hate women. But we are actively sitting there saying, I need to not be anything that a woman might be. Being a woman is the worst thing I can be. Participating in anything that anyone might see as feminine is the worst thing I can do. Therefore, women must be the problem. Fellas, we have to actually actively work against this kind of culture because we're born into it, right? None of us created it. Anyone who's watching this, you didn't create this culture, but I think every one of us has contributed to it. You can go on my Instagram and see all the things that I've said about how I played part in this culture and everything I'm trying to do to walk away from it. But this culture of misogyny that basically says that women are worthless, that men shouldn't engage with any of these characteristics that we've termed feminine, and that even rebranding them, even bringing some of those characteristics over to masculinity would still create challenges and problems, right? If we want to put toughness and strength in the box of masculinity and we want to put crying and sadness in the box of femininity, so be it. Who cares? There's nothing wrong with having them sit in different spaces. There's nothing wrong with having research terms such as masculinity and femininity and having a whole series of characteristics that sit beneath them. There is nothing wrong with that. That is normal. What is not okay is saying that being feminine is wrong or lesser. And that is the problem we have. That is why we're living within a culture of misogyny. And that's why we have to actively work against it. Every time we engage with our mates in language or conversations that degrade or devalue or dehumanize women, whether we're actually talking about women by talking about their bodies in ways that objectify them, or we're talking about each other by saying don't engage with those emotions because they're too feminine, if we're doing those things, we're actively contributing to a culture of misogyny. We are contributing to some men believing it is okay to hate women and therefore harm women. And for the blokes I get to work with, I recognize that they don't want to do that, man. They don't want to be part of that culture. They don't want to contribute to that. So if we want to work actively against it, we have to recognize when we see those conversations happening in our community and hold some blokes accountable. But you don't actually mean that. Is that actually what you think about women? Bro, I thought you respected women. Hey, bro, if you got to cry, you got to cry. I'm here for you anytime you need me. Man, all of us struggle sometimes, and that's okay. That's part of life. There's nothing wrong with that. Bro, if you ever need to talk, please just reach out, man. You should never feel alone. And look, fellas, if anyone ever calls you a misogynist, if it's a friend, a teacher, a parent, a girlfriend, anyone calls you a misogynist, instead of getting on the defensive and saying, oh, I don't hate women, that's bullshit, maybe sit back and go, wait, what do you mean? What did I do? Be open and curious to why someone might have called you that. Most of the time, it's coming from a place where they're saying, maybe do things a little differently. And in my experience, what it has helped me to do is show up as a better person when I've understood how and why the things I've done have been placed in this space of misogyny. When I look at those things and I reflect on what they contribute to, I recognize an opportunity for me to step away. And it's the people around me who've held me accountable to those things that have helped me do that. Just like Joey Swoll does for the gym community, right? Like I said, I absolutely agree with the sentiment of this statement of be a good and kind human being and everything will be okay. Be good to yourself and the ones you love, everything will be okay. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the things that sat above it, because I thought it was important for us fellas to try and work through some of that stuff. As always, if you're challenged by this, if you've got questions about it or you want to chat about it, please reach out. I'm always here for a chat. Appreciate y'all. So moving on to the workout of the day, we have a 20-minute EMOM. So there'll be 5 rounds of these 4 exercises. In the first minute, we've got 20 wall balls. Do whatever height you want. Obviously, this is only 7 feet, but you can do 9 or 10 or whatever the standard height is. And just in case you thought I wasn't hitting my depth, there's a side-on angle. But yeah, 20 wall balls in the first minute. Then in the second minute, you're going to do 16 back extensions. I've just got a homemade setup here using my box and then the rig, one of the bench press arms for my rig. And then the hardest thing about this was actually getting off the box, to be honest with you. Then we have 12 cals, 12 cals on the Echo bike. In the third minute, we'll move on in a second to the final exercise. We're going to do a 50-meter farmer's carry. Look, I recognise that this topic that I spoke about today, misogyny and masculinity, is a tough one. So I'm hoping that although this is going up early and all people are going to see it, I'm hoping that over time more people see it and more questions are asked about this particular topic. So fellas, please reach out if you have any questions about misogyny or masculinity. I'd love to chat. Us.